Good morning, and welcome to my live, making engaging community connections accessible here on Tuesday, August 18th. If you remember from yesterday, we are regrouping and reinventing and restoring and another R word if I can think of one for Mecca Live. And so we are recapping the last week that we were unable to complete several weeks ago. The topic at that time was public news, private news, and the today's topic is don't tell your mother. We were able to pre-record this one. We were able to go ahead and have this one play, but I wanted to just start over and begin at the beginning of the week this topic and kind of condense them all together. So again, this week's theme is public news, private news, and today's topic is don't tell your mother. Now, I want to explain to you why the name of why that's the name of today's topic. Basically, I'm going to tell you a short story about how I arrived at this public news, private news kind of thing, and it's not mine, it's not original. So I want to give credit where credit is due. But the topic is going to address the different kinds of things that are said, different kinds of strategies and manipulatable ways people address not just childhood trauma, but kind of what to look for. Like if I want to tell my kids, like if someone says this, be mindful, right? It may not mean every time someone says these kinds of things, it may not necessarily mean that you're being groomed for abuse, or they want you to hide information or keep secrets from your parents that can keep you safe. But knowing what to look for is important for us to teach our children and our students. And so that's the crux behind, that's the meat behind today's topic. But I want to explain to you how don't tell your mother, I arrived at that topic and why the theme was public news, private news. So when I was getting my bachelor's degree in Michigan, I worked at a latchkey program in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And this was my last 2 years. No, my senior year I did my internship, so I couldn't do the latchkey program. So maybe it was my second and third year. I can't remember. But anyway, I worked at the latchkey program, and the location was situated, it was in the community. So it was, the students could walk right from their elementary, middle school to our location, because it was like on the way for them walking home. It wasn't that far of a walk. And the lady that ran it when I was, working there, her name was Miss Brown. And you could come in, they would have a snack, kind of like an after school program. Come in, have a snack. We had carpet time, so this big round carpet, we sit on the carpet, and she would give us information, sometimes tell a story, highlight something positive that the students were doing, if something was coming up. So it was kind of like, the kids trickled in, this is where everything began. And then we would break off into our age group locations, the rooms, and we would help them we would tutor them with their homework and make sure they got that stuff done. And then if time was permitting, we would have like some kind of game or some kind of activity, and they would be dismissed from their classrooms, as the group finished what they were doing. And if there were a couple of students that needed additional assistance, then, we did that. So many wonderful experiences from that program. But I remember us being on a rug one day, and remember, this is K through 8. We're coming to the latchkey program, and with the little ones, they're just telling business. And so she was amazing. Like, she would sit there and they would say something, and she would just go into, like, the way she did it, you would think that it was part of her what she had prepared to present to the students. But she was like, sometimes we need to remember, or whatever. She went into this whole thing about public news and private news. And so she gave examples of what public news would be. And then she gave examples of what private news would be. And she was like, and that might be public news, or that's probably more, more along the lines of private news. And so it wasn't like this, stop telling business, but it was like a gentle reminder. Some things you don't need to say in public, some things you need to say in different settings, right? And so that's how I arrived at public news, private news. But the don't tell your mother part, I want to address childhood trauma, abuse, and other forms of violation and manipulation and grooming. But it always, I should say always, because that's absolute, generally moreover, it begins with language. It begins with different things that we say, and the grooming process starts with this interaction, right? So I wanted to give you that little bit of a background there. Um, so I want to tell two other things, kind of like to put in perspective. When I was small, it started when I was small, but my mom would say it periodically as I got older. Um, don't trust a man that says trust me, right? And I thought that was funny. Being a kid, I'm like, okay. And she said, if you can trust them, they don't have to tell you that. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna let you have that. That makes sense. Now, again, everything in context and understand. And the assumption was that, and I am heterosexual. I'm just saying that because I don't want to present information that can lend itself easily to one way or the other, um, as that's not my platform. And I, when you listen to me, I do my presentations. Any of you that know me know that's not where. I'll have a whole topic about that at another time. But I want to put that in context. So she said that. Then, as I was preparing this, like several weeks ago, I remembered a commercial, and I can't remember what. I feel like it was either Snickers or Kit Kat. Um, but it was back in the '90s, and it was all these clips of parents with their kids, right? So mom got on the elevator with her little girl. She goes, "My mommy had to cut up all her credit cards." Another little boy said, "My daddy has a rash on his." And the next one comes in, and it's just like, oh my gosh, right? So I'm looking at this commercial, and I remember laughing every time it came on, laughing, laughing, laughing. One, because I could totally see that happening. And when that commercial was out, I was not a mother yet, but it was. I had nephews and nieces, and not nephews. I had nieces, and I had cousins, and I had friends that had children, and I was like, oh my goodness, yes, this. It was so relevant. It was so funny. But that's the thing: public news, private news. So I wanted to put that into context. And so when my mom said, "Don't trust someone who tells you trust me," if they say that, then why? Like, look at the. Now, if it's a surprise party, oh, come here, close your eyes, put the blindfold on. Trust me, that's different. When someone is saying that in as it relates to a relationship, or as it relates to fidelity, or some kind of dedication or commitment, think about it, think it through. And her thing was weigh all the information, right? Um, but inside the context of this topic, don't tell your mother. Who are moms? Who, who are moms, right? Don't tell your mother, don't tell your parents. Another one, if you love me, we're talking about, remember the context is manipulation, grooming for dysfunctional and toxic relationships, childhood trauma, and abuses and violation of many forms. You're so here's the grooming part, right? Setting them aside, making you feel like you are different toward their benefit. Now, if you see someone, or and please make sure that if you have this conversation with your children and your students, that you balance it out, because you may be one of those people that says you're so. Make sure you explain and are clear in the disparity, how the two are different. Because I tell my children all the time, my daughter, you're so beautiful. You're so. That's one of them. But it's in context. I'm watching her evolve into this beautiful woman. My son has evolved into this amazing young man. You're so talented. You're so da da da. But you're so, and there's the isolation. There's the pedestal. Why? Right? You are different because you understand me. We may have people say that to us. How does that play into this topic? Because if I'm telling somebody you understand me in a way to dismiss what I'm doing because you make it okay, I'm grooming you to be my enabler, which takes the responsibility off of me, which initiates and sustains a codependent relationship. Meaning I can't, if you don't, you can't. And understand language is at the heart of that. How we speak and the words we use and how we fuse these things together begins there. And often at an early age. If I'm telling an impressionable mind and I have the sphere of influence that they will listen to me, and then I say, oh, don't tell your mom, she won't understand. You understand me. So now I am building this thing, because now there's this fidelity issue. Like, but I love my mom, but I don't want anything to happen to them. So there's this responsibility that's transferred, right, on a person, an individual, moreover, a child. That's not right. It's not their responsibility. They're a child, and no other person is responsible for your behavior, right? So let's get into it. Look for what's missing. So when we're having this conversation with our children and with our students, what's missing? Why am I so? Why is it such a big deal that I treat you differently, right? Why is it such an issue that I understand you? I understand you as opposed to what? And I'm not saying have these question them, confront them right then. What I'm saying is, just like when we teach our students and our children how to read, at least when I was learning how to read, and when I've tutored people in reading, I always said, while you're reading, ask the questions in your head. The predicting, what's going to happen next? What that's predicting. How is this connected? What do you see? Like, use your deductive reasoning, use your analytical reasoning as you're reading, right? It's the same thing when we watch TV shows and movies. We're like, oh, don't go around that corner, cuz why? Something in our brain has said, and it's not just like a fear factor. Don't go there, because there's that piece there. But as we watch the show, as it's progressed, we're like, no, don't go behind that door, because the last time you were behind the door, right? So the same types of things. Our minds are geared toward recognizing and applying, I'm using that word loosely, patterns, right? So when something happens repeatedly, we begin to expect and anticipate without thinking, oh, that happened yesterday at 2:35, so it's going to happen today, right? Some of these things automatically happen, and so we need to be mindful to tell our children, to inform them. These are some of the things that people do. These are some of the things that people say when they don't mean you any good. But understand that somebody may say that, and it may not be that category. Give them examples. Demonstrate it. The best thing right now that works to our advantage toward this goal is we have a lot of time. A lot of us are working remotely. We have a lot of time. And when I say working remotely, I'm not saying pause your day to have these conversations. No, I'm saying that I'll use me for an example. So when I began working remotely, I remember it was like the end of the second week. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I feel bad that it took me 2 whole weeks to get to this point of recognition. But at the middle of the second week, to the end of the second week, I was sitting on the couch, and I remember looking out the window, because generally after I would eat, I would walk with my neighbor, walk around our community. And I looked, and I was like, the sun is still up. My point is this. The time between getting off work to pick up 2 children from 2 different locations, 2 different schools that were like that far apart from each other, coming home, making sure that everything was done, like homework and everything is taken care of, getting them cleaned up and situated, making dinner, cooking, making dinner, eating dinner, cleaning up like the kitchen and putting everything away, getting ready for bedtime, and chilling with my kids. That period of travel time was removed because I was working remotely and they were going to school remotely. What's my point? My point is we have this ability to have these conversations moreover than in the past, right? For some of us than in the past. Then we also have the opportunity to utilize different things. There's so many resources available online via different media outlets that help us have these conversations, right? And then we have social media, that a lot of kids are involved in. We have different apps and different things, but sometimes a commercial may come on, or sometimes your child may tell you about, did you know, I don't know if I told you that so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. Have that conversation. Don't look for the opportunity so much so that you're preoccupied with it, but be ready for it. So the reason why we're having this conversation right now is so that you have, this is a good time to have this conversation. And understand that some of these conversations are planting seeds. The conversation may not last more than a couple minutes in the seed planting part. And what I've learned from my children, but also my own childhood, if you're like me, well, let me just ask you, because you being like me that's not relevant. Have you ever been in a situation or found yourself saying something that your parents said? Like my father used to always say, think for yourself, think it through, make a choice. That's what he used to say to me. I found myself saying that to my kids and thinking, oh, did I turn into my dad? It was good stuff though, right? My point is, I never growing up thought consciously that that's what I'm going to use with my parents. I'm going to say the same thing. I started saying that before I had kids. I worked with children long before I had children, right? And I found myself saying that to the students in the youth that I work with. Think it through, make the choice. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm repeating, but it was good stuff. My point is this: you never know. Your child may not respond in a way that allows you to it to be obvious that they heard what you said or that they even retained it. But if I know anything from my own childhood and I know anything from my own children, it'll go in and you don't even know. And then somewhere down the line, something will happen or you'll have a conversation or something, and then blah blah blah. Remember when you said you remember that? When you were listening? Good tell. So don't gauge your engagement, right? Don't gauge how often you share these things or the fact that you do. Don't gauge it by their apparent participation or engagement. Keep talking, even if it looks like they're not listening, right? And I don't mean like talk. I mean take these opportunities as they present themselves. If a song on the radio comes on, what do you think that song meant? What do you think about that? Yeah, because I mean, just engage, and it's going to require you having a relationship with your children. It's going to require you having these kinds of conversations. And the thing is, if we're talking to our children on a regular basis, this won't seem weird. But think about it. We don't talk that often, but when we do, it's don't trust me. I mean, don't trust people that say don't trust me. Don't trust people that say trust me. But like if the time that we have conversation with our kids is mostly surrounding major topics, I think really go on talking about something. If we're talking to them about Roblox, if we're talking to them about their favorite song, if we're just having conversation in the car, then when we have these conversations, it'll be like, okay, this is different, but it's not different that we're talking. Subject matter may be different, but the fact that we're talking is not. So we need to begin having those relationships and starting those relationships. I'm not saying that this topic is not a good way to begin it. I'm just saying that it could chafe the longevity of this relationship if every time you talk to them, it's around a major issue or subject matter that's weighty, right? So I want you to bear that in mind. And one of the other things is when we talk about grooming and toxic relationships, it's one of the big themes is isolating the individual from their support system or their loved ones, right? So family, friends, whatever. And so it could be relationships like dating, romantic relationships. It could be friendships. It could be family members, right? The thing is, don't get hung up on the who, but the how. It's a template. We've seen these same things play out in cults. We've seen these same things play out in abusive relationships, whether they are domestic violence or sexual assault in nature. We've seen these things play out in obsessive, jealous people, and it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. We know many stories in many cases where things took tragic turns because the friend was jealous that their friend got another friend. So if you look at the mechanics, the pathology, it's a template that can work in any of those capacities. And that's why you don't want to say, well, you don't want to get in an abusive relationship because they look like this. Tell them what it looks like. Explain the mechanism and say it could be an abusive relationship. It could be an abusive boss. It could be a neighbor, a friend. So get them the mechanics, what it looks like, the pathology, so that they can see it in any arena. Because if we narrow it down and relegate it to a category, then they're never going to see it coming with a friend. They're never going to see it coming with a boss. They're never going to see it coming in an organization. Give them the pieces and then tell them how to apply, right? The reason why I'm saying that is because one of the things that somebody mentioned to me was, do you always have to go to your parents' house on Sunday? Okay. Without context, that can mean anything, right? Inside context. I don't know if any of you have ever watched Everyone Loves Raymond. So that comment makes a lot of sense. Like, do they really have to be with the parents all the time? The mother was always at the house. Like, they were always walking in, like literally just walking in. So if Deborah, the wife, said, we always have to, okay, now you see the context, you understand that. If it's a tradition that's come up in the family, we knew about it before we got together, this is something we do, and now you want it to just stop abruptly, every now and then, maybe okay, but that's the piece. What's the missing piece? Why? What's the why behind it? I don't feel so good today, I want to do something different, da, 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 da. But look at the big picture of the dynamics of the relationship, and then what's the what's the why, right? So make sure you give them those pieces, because it could be a situation where they are trying to isolate you, or they don't feel comfortable because of who they are, right? Or it could be, we really need to have some private time, right? I just need a break, right? We need, so context and unpacking those things. But when we look at things, pathology, patterns, commonly used and things that are commonly said by those who are manipulative, controlling, obsessive, and or want to groom toward, then we really need to take notice of that. One book I want to recommend is called Emotional Blackmail, and it's by Susan Forward. It's an amazing book. Since I first read it, I think she's revised it twice. So the book that I had is red and black. Red on top, black on the bottom with the letters, emotional blackmail. It talks about these kinds of relationships and the kind of things that people say when it's very manipulative. And a lot of her scenarios, I think, a lot of her scenarios look at relationships, specifically those in the family, because generally, your family, if anyone's going to know a lot of your business, generally it's your family. But that's a really good book, Emotional Blackmail by Susan Forward. I wanted to make sure I put that in there. But the reason why we want to have these kinds of conversations and begin them, so that, that phrase, Mama said there'd be days like this, we need to let our kids know these are taglines. And everybody that says it may not be a bad person or mean you harm, but understand that a lot of people that mean you harm use these taglines. This is what we look for. Why? Here comes the real talk. Why? Because our children are starting to have romantic relationships earlier than we do. Because here where I live in Florida, high human trafficking situation. And understand, COVID made that worse. Made it worse. Because now we have less eyes on people that had respite going to school, that had respite going to work. Now we have less eyes, because where are they now? Right? And I'm not saying that as a way of doom and gloom. One moment. I'm not saying. As a side note, try to pick a time when this wouldn't happen. It's been tenuous. But I'm not saying that in the sense of doom and gloom, but moreover, because it's the reality. Now, there are a lot of organizations, a lot of people, a lot of different groups that have made it their mission to create services or availability, whether it's virtually or whatever, to replace the missing eyes, right? So different organizations have come up with different really cool things to do to engage people that are normally in school or at different programs. Now, some of them not so much, but some of them have. So I don't want it to be like, oh, so all the people that are abused in relationships or child abuse or human trafficking is just doom and gloom. It's tenuous, because now, without having the caliber of access that we had prior to COVID, that's changed. But the beauty of human resilience is that we find a way, right? And those of us on the front line, and understand that in this context, I'm not talking about doctors and nurses. I'm talking about social workers and counselors. I'm talking about case managers. I'm talking about the people that still do the home visits. I'm talking about those who work in mental health, and those who work in substance abuse, and those who work in child welfare, who are not doctors and nurses, who don't get paid doctors and nurses' salary, who are on the front line and can easily track COVID, who make the difference in the lives of children and families every day. And their role, their involvement, saving lives from suicide, saving lives from overdosing, saving lives from abuse and neglect. They're on the front line as well. And so understand that those of us in that camp of professions and professionals that are dedicated and devoted to this, we haven't stopped. We'll figure it out. but the timing is kind of tenuous. Okay, so let's keep going. The reason why I want to have this conversation with you, obviously, is so that we're making our kids aware, right? If any of you have played sports, you understand we have plays and we go over those plays, we practice those plays. How many of you have ever done a fire drill? It's the same reason. We don't say, okay, the fire may start because this, and this. We may have that conversation, but that's not what happens at the drill. The drill is how fast do we get out with our whole person intact at the first sign, when the smoke alarm first goes off and we see the first flame. Because maybe we made some toast and just kicked up some stuff. So obviously there's the evaluation assessment process. But when it's a fire, what do? And we practice the drill. The military practices their drills. Athletes practice their drills. Why? So it's second nature. That jump kicks in. What do I do? What do I do? Because initially, a lot of times we have that adrenaline starts or whatever kicks off. And then we do what we practice. Because when I was an athlete, my coaches said the same thing. We play like we practice, and that's why we practice like we play. Every time we had a scrimmage, every time we ran a drill, we were in game mode. I need you in game mode. So that when you're in the game, right? That's why we had this conversation. Killing me. And so our children are worth that, right? I want to tell you what our children aren't and what they deserve. Our children are not objects to be manipulated toward the gratification of somebody else and the service of somebody else. Our children are not a thing to be used and then discarded, tossed away, right? When they no longer serve the purpose that, for which they were secured, right? And I don't mean secured like abducted. I mean like whatever. Our children deserve to be respected. And they deserve to be treated with respect and seen as a person of value. They deserve to be children. They deserve to be children. And the more people like you and the more people like me advocate for them, we protect the innocence of their childhood. They can't do it. They can't. And as sad as it is, we have to make our children aware that there are people out there that mean them no good, toward their harm and destruction. Right? We have to do that as responsible adults, as specifically as responsible parents, but as responsible adults that have any sphere of influence over children, coaches, parent, social worker, friend of people that have children. It's my responsibility. Even if I wasn't a social worker, it's still my responsibility because I'm an adult. I'm responsible, an adult, right? But our children need to have childhood. It's our responsibility to protect their innocence. Ours. They're little people. We teach them and groom them to grow into productive beings in society, but they're little people. They're not insignificant. They're not disposable. They're not little gnat flies annoying. They're not. Our children deserve to be uplifted, nurtured. They deserve to be taught who they are and their value, and they deserve our time. So generally we end. I have a minute before we end, so I want to give you your at-home work. And remember, your at-home work is just an activity, just something to think about, or something to do, however you want to do it. But basically, your at-home work is, what is one way you can advocate for children? What is something that you can do to stand in the gap between a child and this type of interaction, right? What is one thing that you can do that you're willing to commit to that can support the protection of children? It could be as simple as see something, say something. It could be as simple as saying something kind to a child, when you see them. That's something I try to do all the time. I look and see, I like your earrings or your hair is pretty, but I pick something that I really do like. Don't lie to them. Don't do that. But most children that, I'm a kid magnet anyway, so that's easy. But what is something you're willing to do? See something, say something. What are you willing to do? All right, we are at our 30-minute mark, which is our time to close, but I want to let you know that tomorrow's topic, we're going to continue the theme public news, private news. Tomorrow's topic is masks, facades, and other plasticware. And the reason behind that, what does that mean? What are we going to be talking about? When keeping things private keeps us from processing and resolving our issues. So facades, masks, things of that nature. So public news, private news, masks, facades, and other plasticware. Be kind to yourself that you may be kind to others. And as always, speak life. See you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.